So I wanted to talk about a concept quickly that I was thinking about when I was on my walk today. Um, so I was thinking about the ways that the ways that in order to reach a sense of enlightenment, understanding, like part of self-awareness that ends up kind of like making ourselves into who we want to be. The backbone of this is really about honesty. It's about being honest with yourself, and it's about, first of all, knowing what you do. This is like being really honest with yourself about how you show up in spaces when you're interacting with people, also when you're by yourself. And when I say knowing what you do, it's like when you're in situations that may feel like triggering or stressful to you, or like situations where you may show up in a way where you may be embarrassed by the way that you show up, or you may not appreciate the way you show up, or it's not wanted in the way that you show up. Like, say somebody does something and you feel angry about it and you just snap or you go off. Like, thinking back to that, is that really how you want to show up in that space? And I think being honest with ourselves about these times when those things actually happen, this is part of becoming enlightened, because you're becoming aware, and you have to be honest with yourself about the ways that you show up or fail to show up, if that's what you want to call it, when it comes to you being tested by things. And if you're not even recognizing that there are times when you show up or don't show up, whatever you want to call it again, it's like when you enter into a space and like you do something unwanted, but you're not even recognizing that that happened, how are you even going to start to modify your behavior? And this is not about being like, oh, I'm a bad person, like labeling yourself like that, because I want to just take all of that and throw it out of the window, because when we start thinking like that, there isn't really progress to be made, because you're exemplifying black and white thinking, dichotomous thinking, and there's no progress to be made in that, because you're constantly labeling and categorizing things. Because when you're like, oh, I'm just not a good person, or like because of the way I act, or like this person isn't a good person because of the way that they act, there's no room for understanding or for growth in that. And so if we throw all of those labels out of the window and instead we gather up understanding and compassion for ourselves, which also allows us to be compassionate and understanding for those around us, we allow room for recognition and understanding and growth. So when we enter into a space and we decide to acknowledge the times where we didn't show up in a way that we wanted to, in recognizing that, it leaves room for us to change those things. And it's not out of not liking ourselves or labeling ourselves as bad or hating on ourselves. It's like, I know that I can do better than that, or this is a problem and this is something that I want to change, and doing it from a standpoint where you want to do better, you feel like you can do better. And in order to, in recognizing where we can do better, it also it also makes room for us to then, once we recognize these things, to be like, well, why do I show up like that? What is triggering to me? And then you go back to like maybe a trauma that you experience, or understanding underlying anxiety that you have and how that actually manifests as anger. And just for an example, and in recognizing, again, our own faults, if you want to call it that, or the ways that we show up, again, in like ways that we wish we had done differently, it really leaves room for us to change. And I think until we're ready to be honest with ourselves about like, no, I could have showed up in this way, or like, oh, I wish that I would have shown up differently. Even if you don't know how else you could have shown up differently, it's about acknowledging the fact that you did something that you want to modify. And it's because, not out of hating yourself, not out of like any self-degradation, nothing like that. It's like, I know I can do better. I love myself and I want to do better. I love those around me and I want to do better. And always from that sort of standpoint, like we can take this into like a more tangible thing. Like, let's talk about our bodies. Say there's like something about your body that you want to modify or that you want to change, like out of love. It's like, I love myself, so I want to be able to go on a walk every day. I want like my body to be able to be mobile, things like that, okay? And it's not like, oh, I hate myself because I'm so fat and stuff like that. That ends up like prospering a lot of negative emotions and things that your spirit is not going to digest well, and it's going to spit back up in like outer ways that affect our bodies. This is about going back and being like, because I love myself, I want to take care of myself. And part of taking care of myself, to me personally, is being able to go on a walk every day. Okay, so approaching it from love rather than hate. And I think that when we start being honest with ourselves about who we want to be, about actions that we want to modify, about what we can do, we can actually start addressing what those issues are in the first place. And until we're ready to be honest with ourselves, we have so much more of a propensity to be in a narcissistic type of energy, because everything is always everybody else's fault. Always. Like, it's that person because they, whatever you want to say. Sometimes when we don't have boundaries for ourselves, we like to point fingers at other people and be like, oh, this person did that at my job, so now I have to stay late. And then you're mad at that person, except it was your choice to stay late. You know what I mean? So I think it's really important for us to be recognizing where we can take accountability and responsibility. And this also goes back to the ways that we understand how we show up. You know, if you don't want to stay late for work, don't stay late to work. Why is it that person's issue when you're the one that chose to stay? You know what I mean? It's always a choice. All right, we are going to leave a little ramble there. I want to thank everybody for being here. I hope that everybody's doing well.